What's up, sports fans and specifically hockey fans in North America? We are back with another episode of True North Sports Talk Podcast. I'm your host, Peter Barclay, as always, and tomorrow, Sunday morning at 8:10 a.m. on the eastern side of things, we get the game that we kind of knew was coming, and we've all been waiting for since the start of the Olympics. Now, tomorrow also marks the last day of the Olympics, and so it's a pretty special day in the world of sports. The day where everything kind of shifts back to normal. But it is Canada versus the US, Olympic gold on the line. And just like in the women's side of the tournament, here in North America, we wouldn't have it any other way. Believe it or not, it's been 16 years since this particular game has happened in the gold medal. And this time around, unlike 4 years ago, we have full NHL player involvement. But we've known that. We've been watching all the games. So, what we knew from the very beginning is that tomorrow, Sunday, February 22nd, before the closing ceremonies, we were going to get the gold medal game. This game is going to take place at Milano Sant'Agula Ice Hockey Arena. It'll host something that people on the net somewheres are calling the Battle of the Ages. Canada's chasing its third consecutive Olympic gold. When featuring NHL players, the US is trying to get its first gold medal since, you guessed it, the Miracle on Ice in 1980. That was 46 years ago. So, we are going to be breaking down everything that you need to know. We'll cover Canada's dramatic comeback in the last two games, specifically yesterday against Finland. Whether Sidney Crosby will play, that's been a huge question mark, and quite frankly, Team Canada hasn't looked the same without him. We'll dive into USA's dominant run. Connor Hellebuyck has been phenomenal. Believe it or not, and having watched these games, the biggest question for both Canada and the US coming into this tournament was, quite frankly, their goaltending. Hellebuyck's had a not quite as good year. Jordan Binnington, other than the Four Nations Cup, hasn't been the same Binnington the last few years. And so it was a big question mark. Now, in watching the games, like I said, if you can see the puck, you can pretty much stop the puck, unless it's like a 2-on-1 or something, and you just can't get there. But for the most part, it's like rebound control, put it in the corner if you can, just make the bare basic stops that you gotta make. There's nothing too spectacular that you have to do. You don't have to come out of nowhere, because the defenses are so good that you're not facing 40 shots a night the way you might in the NHL. So all they've had to do is just be solid. And from both teams, we've got that, and the defense in front of them has stood up, and that's why it looks so good. So we'll analyze the head-to-head history, we'll look at the key matchups, and what each team needs to do to take home the gold for their country. So this is going to be a loaded episode. You don't want to miss it. Grab your coffee, grab your tea, whatever you're drinking while you're watching this, and you'll need it tomorrow morning for that 8 a.m. start. So let's get into it. Let's dive into Olympic hockey's biggest game. And we will start with Canada's dramatic path into this final. And well, it started out the first three games where people were opining that Canada wasn't really tested in those first three games. And it sure didn't seem like it. But you had Sid playing, the team seemed to be firing on all cylinders, and it looked like it was going to be a runaway train. Well, then Sid went down with an injury, Morrissey went down with an injury, and all of a sudden, Team Canada didn't look quite the same. And since then, they have been tested. Switzerland and Finland both stood up and were counted, even though they did not succeed. So Canada came into this tournament, as we even mentioned on this podcast, the heavy favorites. They had the most talented roster on paper because you had Sid, you had Connor McDavid, Nathan MacKinnon, Sam Reinhart, Cole Makar, Drew Doughty, Sam Bennett was added. It's just plain stacked. We haven't even mentioned the likes of a Brad Marchand or a Mark Stone. Guys who are really, really good. Not to mention that crazy amazing winner by one Mitch Marner. And here in Canada, if you live anywhere near Leafland, you know how good Mitch Marner can be. So through the preliminary round, they pretty much dominated. They went 3-0 in Group A. They beat Czechia 5-0, they beat Switzerland 5-1, and they beat France pretty handily. Then came the knockout rounds because that's where Sid was injured, and that's where things got interesting. Canada faced Czechia in the quarters. It was a rematch of their 5-0 stage win. But this time, Czechia was like, not so fast. They came to play. And the game, well, it was tied going into the final seconds. Canada went to overtime. That was the game where Sid suffered his injury because he took a pretty hard hit from two Czechia players, and then almost right after, he slipped and got run over with his leg at an odd angle, and he wasn't able to return, and he has been held out ever since. Now, knowing Sid, he's wanted to play. And I heard an interesting question yesterday that is actually a very pertinent question. And the question is, are the Pittsburgh Penguins the ones holding out Sidney Crosby? And that's pertinent because it's valid if they are. Sid plays for Pittsburgh. We all know he always has. But they have invested a lot in Sid to play for their team. And if they don't want him coming back where he can't help them win, to all Canadians, that should be fully understandable. And there should be no grudges held against Kyle Dubas. Not for that reason anyway, if you're a Pittsburgh Penguins fan. You got plenty of other reasons to be upset with him. So, he didn't return. Their leader, two-time Olympic gold medalist, we weren't sure he's coming back for the rest of the tournament. Now, we'll get into it a bit later, but he's a game time decision for tomorrow. So they survived on that amazing Mitchie Marner goal. Then came yesterday, where they played Finland, a team again they have most times handled fairly well when there's NHL players involved. And this game was yesterday. This is the reigning Olympic champion because last time there was no NHL players involved. And outside of the NHL, they, according to the 2022 Beijing Olympics, have the best non-pro players in the world. And for the first time all tournament, Canada actually found themselves down 2 goals. I remember both goals, in particular, thinking on the second one that, hey, we got a power play here. Canada's got the best power play in the tournament. I'm like, hey, let's tie this up and get going. Next thing I know, I turn around, they're down 2-0. I'm like, huh? What just happened? Turns out Erik Haula scored a short-handed goal in the second period that made it 2-0 Finland. And quite frankly, watching the game, it was pretty scary because Canada seemed to be outplayed by a Finnish team that had fewer NHL stars. But they just clogged the neutral zone. They had great structure. Saros was standing on his head, and they just couldn't figure him out. Again, Crosby, he was out and didn't play. Canada was without their captain, although the C was on McDavid, who admitted he's just keeping it warm. And the thing about what I've noticed in Team Canada the last 2 games, one thing Sid is just probably one of the best in the world, if not the best, is on face-offs. So if he's out there in important moments, not every time, because no one's perfect, but you gotta figure you're gonna start out with puck possession on a face-off. You couldn't count on that the last 2 games. Canada was getting beat left, right, and center in the face-off circle. And that was kind of unusual. So with Sid out, that's one small detail that I noticed that you could point to. One of the other details that I could point to with Team Canada is they have just been far too fancy. They try and make convoluted passes, threading needles that they don't need to be threading, shooting when a player's already sliding to block the shot, which caused them to give up a goal against Czechia, even though there were 8 men on the ice that time, and no one called it, not even Team Canada. So, how we missed that? And you just have these series of poor decisions. Then there's some of the penalties they've been taking that are just, yikes, what are we doing? And so it just hasn't looked like the same Team Canada. So yesterday, down 2-0. And then they finally seemed to decide, okay, maybe we need to pick up our socks here a little bit. Sam Reinhart was able to score a power play goal with about 5.5 minutes left in the second period. That goal was assisted by Makar and McDavid, and that made it 2-1. Thankfully, Canada had finally gotten on the board. Then they played most of the third period where nothing changed. And with 1:04 remaining, and again, this is winding down time, Shea Theodore tied it 2-2. So Canada had finally erased the deficit. Now on that 2-2 goal, Finland was really upset about that 2-2 goal. Why? Because their defenseman tossed Brad Marchand over Saros and was standing up outside the crease by the time the shot was taken. But it flustered Saros, and he'll never admit that. He'll always tell you Marchand was on top of him and he couldn't get to the shot. If you actually watch the play, his own defenseman caused Marchand to be thrown over Saros. But if you watch the replay, Marchand got out of the way as quickly as possible. Saros was able to move freely. And Marchand was standing there for a rebound before the shot was taken. Saros just missed it. And again, that's flustering to have someone land on you. You're rushing. You're not quite where you want to be. But I really, looking back at it from an objective position, and I know that's hard to believe, but by the rules, that's a good goal. I'm sorry, Teemu Selanne, you are wrong. Even though, yes, they were Canadian referees, which never should have happened. And I grant you that, Teemu. But you are wrong. That was a good goal. Even if it happened to Team Canada. And goals like that have happened. It's a good goal because he got out of the way. Your own defenseman put him there. So that's not goaltender interference when your player throws him in there. I know it hurts that you guys lost. Team Canada's lost enough games. I know how you feel. But that was a good goal. So, tied 2-2. Time's running out. 36 seconds left in regulation. Nathan MacKinnon, that puck had eyes. It tipped off the pad, went between the pad and the blocker, and just squeaked its way in. MacKinnon had appeared to score the winner. Canada appeared to be up 3-2. And unlike the previous goal that they thought maybe should have been called back, they tried to call offside. Now, again, I don't know whether it was the screen I was watching or whether it just, when I looked at all the video that I had available to me, there was no conclusive evidence to call offside. You couldn't see where the puck was. It just wasn't conclusive enough. And again, Finland, you whining about that makes you poor losers because that was a good goal. There's nothing conclusive to say it wasn't. And if you're going back over a minute from when the goal was scored, and I know this happens in the NHL, but that was just a little bit petty. I looked at all the video. I saw every replay, all the angles that I could find. There was no conclusive evidence. So, the goal stood. Canada's up 3-2. And y'all complained about the penalty. But by the rules, both in the NHL and the IIHF, their rulebook states if you are unsuccessful in a challenge, you receive a delay of game 2-minute penalty. Why was there any complaint about the penalty? Your challenge was unsuccessful. That is the rules. The referee didn't make the choice to put you in the box. The rule book did. So if you don't like it, cry wolf at the rule book, not the referee. I guarantee you the referee was told in his ear, 2-minute penalty. If he doesn't follow that direction, he doesn't have a job tomorrow. So I don't understand, and I don't get where Finland is after these refs so hard. By the rule book, neither one of those goals should have been called back. And yes, they should have got the penalty. I don't care what game it is. It could be Game 7 of the Stanley Cup. If you fail a challenge, you get a 2-minute penalty. Automatically. It's not debatable. And yet here we are having superstar players, or former superstar players, debating the rule book. So, this is what Jon Cooper had to say after the game. When you're down 2-0 in an Olympic semifinal, you're thinking, this could be it. The entire country was thinking that. But you have guys like McDavid and Crosby and MacKinnon. 2 out of those 3 are Stanley Cup champions, so and McDavid's been there 2 in a row to Game 7. So these guys aren't gonna quit. They don't stop believing, and they just, give me the puck, let's go. McDavid, who stepped in as captain, as we mentioned, he said just keeping the seat warm for him. Hopefully we can get him back. Now, from the time he got injured, the belief was his tournament is not over. Now, again, we have to see whether Pittsburgh allows it, whether he feels up to it. But hopefully, we'll see Sid back out there tomorrow. Again, game time decision. Now, McDavid specifically for a second, he's been quietly unreal. Now, watching the games, he hasn't stood out to me a whole lot. But 12 points in 5 games, that's pretty phenomenal. 2 goals, which is why he maybe hasn't stood out as much, but he has 10 assists. He's making his teammates better. And that puts him in a whole different light, because that's what you need to do to be a great player. And in that Czechia game, when they started running him out there every other shift, all of a sudden he starts winning faceoffs at a high level, which they had been needing all game and just hadn't been getting. So what that makes him, with the 12 points, is the all-time points leader in a single Olympics that involved NHL players. He broke the previous record, and he still has one more game to go. McDavid so far has been the best player in the tournament. And tomorrow he gets a chance to win an Olympic gold medal for the first time in his career. Because 4 years ago, again, NHL players were not involved in the Olympics. He didn't have a chance to. Macklin Celebrini. This kid has been noticeable. He's playing with McDavid and MacKinnon, and he has been fantastic. He's only 19 years old. He's like 1 year removed from the World Juniors, and he has been sensational. He's played on Canada's top line, as we mentioned, and he looks like he belongs there. Celebrini has a goal and 2 assists, but again, he's playing with MacKinnon and McDavid. But he has been dangerous. His speed, his precision, he's even hitting at a high level, and he has just been dangerous every time he steps on the ice. He's also the youngest player in the tournament, but he's playing like he has been there for years and years. If Canada wins the gold tomorrow, Celebrini will become the youngest Olympic champion in hockey history. And now the elephant in the room for Team Canada. Will Sidney Crosby play? After the semifinal win over Finland, Jon Cooper's quoted as saying he's got a better chance of playing in the gold medal game than he had playing in tonight's game. Well, that's encouraging. He's got 2 more days of rest. Crosby's won 2 Olympic golds, 2010, the golden goal, Sid the Kid, and 2014. Again, like we said, in overtime 2010 against the same Americans, 3-2 was the score in that game. So if he plays tomorrow, it would be his chance to win a 3rd gold medal and add more cement to his legacy as one of the best Canadian, if not overall, Olympic hockey players ever. But even if Crosby can't go, Canada's proven they can win without him. And guess what? If they win without him, he still gets a medal. So that 3 gold medal thing will still happen even though he was injured. McDavid, McKinnon, Reinhart, Makar, Mark Stone, Marner, Celebrini, Drew Doughty. We could go on and on. This team has depth. And we've been saying that since before the tournament. Canada's 5-0 in this tournament with 27 goals scored. That is the most of any of the teams. They have the best shooting percentage at 13.43, and they have shown incredible resilience, winning 2 straight games in dramatic fashion. And tomorrow, they're going to need 1 more to beat the undefeated Americans. That all being said, let's talk about the USA team. This team, while Canada's been surviving, they've kind of just been running the table. And from the beginning of the tournament, we knew that this was going to be the toughest test for Team Canada. They have the star power, the NHL players, the coaching. They have pretty near man for man what Team Canada has. They have been excellent throughout the tournament, and this game could come down to whichever, like it did in the 4 Nations, whichever goaltender shows up the most. Team USA, as we said, 5-0 in the tournament. They haven't lost a game. And they haven't really seemed to feel tested at all. So, let's talk about their path the same way we did with Team Canada. They beat Latvia 5-1. Probably their most shaky start was against Denmark, of all people. They were down 3-1, 3-2 at one point in that game, but came back to win 6-3. They were a bit shaky defensively, but again, that 6-3 score, they rolled through it. They beat Germany 5-1. The US won Group C and advanced straight to the quarters. They never faced, other than that Denmark game, any kind of serious blip in the radar, and just rolled through the stage. In the quarterfinals versus Sweden, this was a bit of a test too. They came up against them, and this is where they showed their championship medal. Sweden tied the game 1-1 with just seconds remaining in the regulation. The Americans were this close to losing it in regulation too. But they survived and went to overtime. In overtime, Quinn Hughes, arguably the best defenseman in the entire tournament, although Cale Makar might have something to say about that, potted the game winner. So it was a 2-1 US final. And that game going to overtime was the same day Canada went to overtime against Czechia, and trying to think, there was one other game that day that went to overtime. Switzerland, maybe? No, they were the one team that didn't go to overtime. So anyway, they advanced to the semifinals. Hughes has been incredible in this tournament. He has 7 points, 1 goal, and 6 assists, making him the tournament scoring leader among defensemen, because obviously McDavid is the overall leader in points. He's been the best D-man at the Olympics. Again, Cale Makar might have something to say about that. Not points-wise, but just overall play. But it's not, like, it's just, like I said, Quinn is the top of that heap right now. In the semifinals versus Slovakia, that was yesterday, after the Canada game, the US was ruthless. Dylan Larkin scored .419 into the game off a feed from Zach Werenski. And I know someone who will be happy that Werenski's had a good tournament. Tage Thompson scored with 40 seconds left in the first period, making it 2-0. And it was the first time all tournament the US has scored multiple times in said first period. Then in the second, the boys went to work. Jack Hughes, Jack Eichel scored 19 seconds apart to make it 4-0. Quinn's brother Jack, again, added another late in the period that made it 5-0, heading into the third. Slovakia scored twice in the third. And then there was a next, because we said 5-0, there was a next US goal. Probably an empty netter there. But the game was never really in doubt, as the Americans just jumped out. They were in complete control. Zach Werenski had 3 assists in the game. That brings his tournament total to 5 points, so he's right there behind Quinn Hughes. And he's been a bit of a revelation on the blue line. Well, Connor Hellebuyck, goaltending. We know from, especially here in Canada, watching the Winnipeg Jets, that Connor Hellebuyck is a dynamo. He kind of reminds me of when Canada had Martin Brodeur. He is just that elite. He has a 974 save percentage in this tournament. The best of any goalie. He's faced 95 shots and saved 90 of them. That's 98% goals against average. That's unbelievable. The only guy close is Jordan Binnington. In the semifinal against Slovakia, as you need your goalie to do, Hellebuyck made some key saves that allowed the US to maintain control. He's been calm, composed, he's been clutch. You would expect that from a goaltender of his experience. He is the reigning NHL Hart Trophy winner, which is the MVP, because without him, the Winnipeg Jets aren't the team that they are. He's had a Vezina as the best goalie in 24-25, and he is just desperate to beat Canada at something. They want to win the gold after the US was eliminated 4 years ago when NHL players weren't involved. So if the US wins tomorrow, Hellebuyck will, as always, be a huge reason why. And then there are the brothers, the Tkachuk brothers. And as much as I'm Canadian, one of them plays here in Ottawa during the NHL season. The other one plays in Florida, has won two out of the three Stanley Cups, I think. Maybe all three. But they are exactly the type of player that the US needs. They bring physicality, energy, a certain swagger to the team as they chirp at literally everyone but Canada specifically, although they may not want to poke that bear. But they have a willingness to get under opponents' skin. Kind of like why we have a Tom Wilson and a Brad Marchand on our team. So Brady has been involved in multiple scuffles, go figure. He's dropped the gloves twice in the quarterfinals against Sweden. Ho-hum for those guys. That's just a normal day at the office. He's been a pest. And he plays for Ottawa. We know how pesty he is. And in this tournament and just in hockey overall, it's like a Dennis Rodman. When he's on your team, it's the greatest thing ever. When he's playing against you, it's like, but you get the greatness that's involved there. The Tkachuks have given the US an edge. And some might say that Canada doesn't have that edge. But wait and see. I think it's in there. It'll have to come out tomorrow. And in a rivalry game like this, edginess like that could make a big difference. For the Americans, the way we talk about Connor McDavid and Sid Crosby and McKinnon, the Americans talk about Auston Matthews. He's been solid, but not spectacular. He's got 3 points, a goal, and 2 assists in 5 games. Those aren't the superstar numbers we're used to seeing from him. But again, he's not playing. There's no Marner on that team. The same way he's had a rough year for the Leafs this year. There's just no wingman. The thing about Matthews is he's actually angered Maple Leaf fans because of the fire and the passion and the willingness to scrap and go to the front of the net and stuff he's never shown in Toronto. I've been watching it. Fans are like, where has this been? We want this Matthews on our team. But he just doesn't show up like that when it's the Leafs. It's weird. Like, yeah, he's got all this scoring and stuff, but there's so much more he could do. And he just doesn't. So this is the thing. Matthews doesn't need to dominate offensively for the US to win. They do have quite a few other guys. So he's been excellent defensively. He's played a complete two-way game. Again, the Leafs are like, where's that been his whole career here? If Matthews can elevate his offensive game tomorrow against Canada, the US will be very hard to beat. There's a bit of a connection to the women's side, obviously, the same way there is with Canada to our team. The US women's team won gold on Thursday, beating Canada 2-1 in overtime, and that was huge. So if the men's team wins tomorrow, it would be the first time in history that both women's and men's teams have won gold at the same Olympics. Mainly because the men haven't got it done since before women's hockey was added to the Olympics. So that's a massive motivator for this team, like it was back in 2010. The women did it, and from their perspective, now it's the men's turn. So the head-to-head history and rivalry, well, Canada versus US, especially here in North America, it's the biggest rivalry in international hockey, some would say. The all-time Olympic record between Canada and the US, they've met 19 times at the Olympics, and Canada is 12-4-3. That's pretty dominant by the Canadian side. But when you narrow it down to games involving NHL players, because it wasn't always that way, and that's what we have tomorrow, Canada is 4-1 against the US. In gold medal games, these two teams have met 3 times. 1920 in Antwerp. So that's over 100 years ago now. Canada won that game. Salt Lake City in 2002. Canada won that game 5-2. And in 2010, in overtime, the golden goal. So Canada is 3-0 in Olympic gold medal games against the US. The Americans are looking to break that streak tomorrow. The Canadians are looking to build off the Four Nations win. And the most recent Olympic meeting, the last time these two teams met, was in the preliminary round in Beijing. Again, Beijing had no NHL players. The US won that one 4-2, but it was preliminary round. So that game did not feature the NHL, as they did not participate in 2022. So that's really not that comparable. As I've been mentioning all the way through, the Four Nations face-off that happened quite literally 1 year ago, this month, that's the most recent time these two met with NHL players involved. And Canada won that game 3-2 in overtime, with McDavid getting his own golden goal. The US has been bitter about that loss ever since. Matthew Tkachuk said this week, last year Canada got the better of the US. Team US will undoubtedly be looking to seek revenge in this gold medal game. That loss, it just adds extra motivation for the Americans because they want payback. However, you could argue that should add motivation for Canada to keep their foot on the neck of the Americans when it comes to hockey. Canada has 9 Olympic gold medals in men's hockey. That's the most out of any team. They have 16 total medals, which is also the most. The US has 2 Olympic golds, 1960 and 1980, and 11 total medals, third most behind a team who is no longer allowed at the Olympics the last little while, and that is behind Russia. So this rivalry is where Canada has historically dominated. The US has the talent and the motivation to potentially change that tomorrow. So we'll see, and it'll be so interesting to watch this game and see which way the cookie crumbles. So, what are the keys to the game? Even though we've mentioned some of them all the way along, we'll start out with Team Canada. The key: they really want and need to get Sidney Crosby back. If Crosby can play, that will be a massive boost. His leadership, his experience, that clutch gene that he just has will be invaluable, because if they can keep it to a point and he gets that moment, you have to believe there's another golden goal in there somewhere. So having him, even if he's not 100%, changes everything for Team Canada. Then you have McDavid and McKinnon. You need them to be dominant tomorrow. These are two, three, if you count Sid, of the best five players in the entire world. And they need to be the best players on the ice tomorrow. If they can control the game, then Canada wins. They also need to win the special teams battle. Doesn't matter what hockey game you're playing, whether it's game 1 of an 82 game season, game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals, or an Olympic gold medal game. You have to not take dumb penalties and stay out of the penalty box. Let the other team do that and then capitalize when they do. So that's what, as Team Canada, you really need to do, is make sure that you're not giving up short-handed goals like they did yesterday, and just yourself play clean, hard-nosed hockey and stay out of the penalty box. So their power play, especially when Sid's there, has just been phenomenal. Nathan MacKinnon's game winner came on the power play yesterday. And so Canada really needs to capitalize on those opportunities. They have to find a way to limit the Hughes brothers, especially Quinn. He's been the best defenseman in the tournament. And so Canada needs to shut him down and prevent him from creating offense from the blue line. Now here's the big one that we really need to cover. They need Four Nations Jordan Binnington to show up tomorrow. He needs to stand on his head. He's been okay, but he's given up 6 goals in 5 games. Against the US firepower, he needs to be better. But 6 goals in 5 games? That number actually doesn't sound right to begin with. So hold up. Shutout. 1. Yesterday was 2. Yeah, 6 goals in 5 games, but that's not terrible. That's 1 goal a game. So they really need him to be on his game tomorrow. For the US, well, they need their goalie to do the same. They need him to try and steal it for them. He's capable of playing that way. And if they can't find a way to solve him, and if he's the best player on the ice, Canada will have to settle for silver. The US needs to get physical early, roll the Kachucks out there every chance they get, try and get under Canada's skin, make them uncomfortable, play fast, play hard, and with that edge the Kachucks bring. Quinn Hughes, he's got to continue doing his thing from the defense, running their power play if they get a chance, and he needs to be able to control the blue line. He's got to generate some offense, but he's got to be responsible defensively against the likes of McDavid and MacKinnon. Celebrini, Marner, they've got their work cut out for them on that American defense. They need Matthews to do Matthews things, maybe have a golden goal type moment of his own. And so yeah, tomorrow will be his chance to potentially be a hero. This is the biggest game that Austin Matthews has ever played in. It's not like Matthew Tkachuk, who's been in the Stanley Cup Finals, or any of his other teammates who have. It's not like that. This is the thing I think where Canada really has the edge, is that so many, like Makar, MacKinnon, Bennett, Reinhart, Mark Stone, Binnington, Crosby, Even McDavid has been there, even though he didn't win. Let me think. Doughty. All these guys have been either winners of the Stanley Cup or in the Stanley Cup final. And I think that's where that experience in these high pressure, high power games, where Canada actually will have the edge. It's that comfort level at that level of play that some of the American players just can't match. I mean, Hellebuck's been pretty far, although he didn't make it to the Cup finals yet. Matthew Tkachuk's won some cups. I'm trying to think of anyone else who on their team who's been that far. I'd have to look at the full roster, but I think that's Canada's advantage, is that they have been in these type of games before. So the US has to stay out of the penalty box, because Canada's power play, to say the least, has been lethal. The US can't afford to give Canada multiple power play opportunities. And that leads us into the key matchups. McDavid versus Quinn Hughes. That's the best forward versus the best defenseman. Oh, Charlie McAvoy. There's another name that's been there, done that. Nathan MacKinnon versus McAvoy. McKinnon's been clutch. McAvoy is one of the best shutdown defenders. You got Hellebuck versus Binnington. We've been all over that matchup. And then you got the Tkachuk brothers versus pretty much all of Team Canada's physicality. But don't sleep on Tom Wilson and Brad Marchand and Mark Stone. And some of these guys are actually more rugged than you can imagine. Think about the way that Sam Bennett and Reinhart have been playing the last few years with the Florida Panthers. That Panthers team the past few years has been rough, it's been rugged, and they have been hard to play against. So Canada has grit in there. They just aren't playing with that style because they haven't needed to. So we'll see how that side of Team Canada comes out of them. So can the Tkachuks get under Canada's skin, or will Canada match their intensity and be able to overcome it? So, y'all know how I hate predictions. So all I'm going to say is that I could see this game going to overtime, and I could also see it going either way. It'll come down to, can they stay out of the penalty box? That goes for both teams. It'll come down to goaltending. That goes for both teams. And it'll just come down to, I believe, the face-off circle. Because that's been a bit of a sore spot for Canada heading into the gold medal game. So, there's a lot of things. There's a lot of motivation from both sides. And it's going to come down to one moment, one bounce, one play. And we're all going to be wanting to be there to not miss it. Because I know where I was in 2010 when that golden goal happened, as do most of Canada and the US. One in jubilation, one in heartbreak. But those aren't moments that you tend to forget. Alright, y'all. So that's the preview for today. We're getting you ready for the gold medal. This has been a special episode of True North Sports Talk Podcast. Hope you stuck around to this point. Hope you enjoyed it. Don't worry, our regularly scheduled episode will air on Wednesday at 4 o'clock. So there's going to be another episode to enjoy this week. But for now, tomorrow morning, 8:10 a.m., Canada takes on the US for Olympic gold. It's on NBC, streaming on Peacock, In Canada, it'll likely be on TSN, Sportsnet, CBC, all across our channels as well. And then today, by the time this airs, earlier on at 2:40, will be Finland and Slovakia for the bronze. So this is the game we've all been waiting for, y'all. The biggest rivalry in hockey, Olympic gold on the line, full NHL rosters for the first time since 2014. Will Canada win its third straight gold with NHL players, or will the US end a 46-year drought? Well, we'll all be watching with bated breath tomorrow. We're going to find out. So what do you guys think? Jump into the comments. Use hashtag TrueNorthSportsTalk. Who do you guys think is going to win? Will it be Canada? Will it be the US? Do you think Connor Hellebuyck's going to be able to steal it? Do you think Sid's going to play? Drop a comment. Hit us up. Let us know. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Hopefully you stuck around to this. Another episode of True North Sports Talk in the books. Set your alarms early for tomorrow. This is going to be epic. So until next time, stay passionate, stay informed. Go Canada. And we'll see you on the other side.